So Birmingham Airport is one of the UK's top 10 airports. It's also one of the fastest growing airports in the UK. And that's primarily because of its central location in the middle of the country. It services a wide geographical area. But in addition to that, HS2 will terminate about 30 minutes away from Birmingham Airport, which will mean that the travel time from London to Birmingham will be reduced dramatically. So it's an airport that's growing quickly, and it's also going through a lot of change at the moment. They've invested a great deal of money into the airport infrastructure itself to improve the passenger experience once inside the airport. And to sort of fit with that, they're also looking at a fresh digital strategy that will support customers outside the airport and inside the airport. So when Quba won the tender for this project, we decided that we needed to focus on three key areas that would make this a success for them. The first one was to recognise that primarily passengers need good and timely information. That's the primary delivery point for websites supporting airports. That means great and easy to use flight information, up-to-the-minute information relating to wait times, and also the ability to provide information in relation to emergency situations and changes in weather or other situations that affect the passenger journey. So good information is number one. The second thing for Birmingham was recognising that they needed a long-term strategy for their choice of digital platform. And this was critical really because it was more than a website. It was choosing a technology that would support the airport beyond the website and that would deliver omni-channel content across screens, across shopping panels and other airport infrastructure. So it needed to do a lot more than just deliver a website. And the third point was that we recognised there's two very different user experiences with airports. One of them is pre-airport, so that's booking parking, booking speedy boarding, and generating revenue from those key revenue sources. But once customers and passengers are inside the airport, then we recognise that's a very different user experience that really needed to focus on a stripped-back version of the website that would support passengers for the things they needed inside the airport. So such as, security wait times again, pinning their exact flight information onto the mobile phone so they knew exactly what was happening with that flight, and also aligning it with shopping opportunities once they're airside. So it's a combination of supporting customers inside the airport, but also recognising that this is a revenue-generating opportunity as well for the airport.
So Birmingham Airport have embarked on a 10-year transformation programme. We ran 2 workshops in person with them, engaging their wider stakeholder team, which included the customer experience, head of customer experience, their commercial team, so we could align with their commercial and business goals, brand team, so we were ensuring that we were launching their brand online effectively, and the content teams, security, so that we could be sure we were making sort of considerations around the flight feeds and other technologies being used within the business. We then ran sort of quite engaging activities to ensure that that wider team was a collaborative exercise, so sketching, ideation, empathy mapping, getting people off their seats really in the room and engaged and involved in and owning the final outcome of discovery. Looking at the different journeys of those user types as well, so whether that is a family with small children or a passenger with assisted needs or a business traveller or a couple going away for the weekend, really understanding their experience through the airport, their touch points with the website, and making sure that there's content there to support across all of those different platforms and experiences. At the end of discovery, we wrapped everything up, and then we had a good footprint, a good blueprint on which to then go and make a good start with the UX phase. We really wanted to take advantage of the opportunities with headless, particularly with it being an airport. People aren't travelling through the website, they're travelling through the airport. So we wanted to ensure that content was really being positioned and delivered to the passenger at the right time. So passengers typically, start planning their trip from a few weeks before. They arrive at the airport a few months before sometimes, but certainly the preparations start before they get in the car, on the way to the airport, and then they arrive, and then they're through security, and when they get to the other side. So we started to think about the touch points, not just on the website, but then what happens when they get to the airport. This sort of idea that the passenger is slightly frazzled when they arrive, and we want to relax them. This is a fun experience. They might be going on holiday. So we kind of really wanted to inject some of that in the experience online and support some of that. And so we introduced this idea of this airport mode. And so the idea is that this is content that is on the platform, it's on the website, but it's delivered in a way that is much more unique and much more useful to a passenger travelling through the airport. So the passenger arrives at the airport, they load up the website on their phone, and they immediately get a much more relevant, much more catered for view. So they can now pin their flight, and that shows on a dashboard, which is a much more kind of tangible screen where you feel like you've got much more control over your own personal kind of view. You can map your way around the airport more effectively. You don't need to find a kiosk or something on a wall. You can do it from your phone. But also, because it's headless, we can use this kind of like omni-channel approach whereby the in-airport mode can also live in the kiosks in the airport. So the user has control of it in the palm of their hand, but they can also go to a kiosk. This is particularly helpful with people with assisted travel needs, because it means that if they need to find a washroom close by or one of the support desks, then they are also effectively mapped within this kind of airport mode application, this subdomain that we've created. The future of this might look like something where we can then track and manage how people are seeing offers from the airport, seeing how effectively they are being engaged with, and just generally it helps us to kind of create a much more personalised view for passengers while they're in the airport and engage them into that Birmingham experience in a much better way. So creating an accessible website is absolutely crucial, but for Birmingham, the content on the website formed an important resource for particular types of traveller and those travelling with those with assisted needs as well. So the airport itself facilitates airline passengers effectively. So the responsibility to get the passenger from A to B and onto the plane and off the plane lies with the airline. But ultimately, because it's the airport that facilitates that, we wanted to make sure that the content on the website was there to answer any questions, to guide people in the right direction when they arrive at the airport. We didn't want to create any more friction there. And certainly when these things go wrong, it means a person is stranded and left not knowing where to be. The other thing that we were very kind of conscious of going into this project is it's not people simply with visible assisted requirements, it's people with more of a neurodivergence as well, and there are routes and methods to kind of facilitate that kind of passenger within the airport. So managing that content online and being able to support and serve that content online along with the airport experience, the airport mode experience, means that we are accommodating everybody's different requirements through all these different touch points. So there have been a lot of changes at Birmingham Airport, and it was important that with this new relaunch we were able to effectively execute the brand online to reflect who they are as an airport and the passenger experience. So we carefully considered use of imagery, use of their brand palette, particularly so that it was accessible. We could then use this, and we did user testing during the design phase to make sure that the affordance across the site, that the usability across the site was up to par, people were able to find the right content. And broadly, the website came across reflecting the airport and the approachable, friendly personality that they have.
So in Birmingham, we wanted to use MAC methodologies when building the project to make it a long-lasting project that could be extended at any point. To do that, we used API-first methodology. Birmingham have got a lot of data feeds that they want to put into the site, so that might be parking or flight feeds, stuff like that. In the previous site, that was tightly coupled to the code, meaning that it was really inflexible. So when we got the project, we wanted to change that and make it really flexible for the future. So we made an API-first element of that, an API that we built in Azure that pulled in all the data from the parking, from the flight feed, etc., and I think could be used elsewhere and easily used on the site. Also using Contentful, because that's by its definition composable, that just fits together really nicely and makes a very long-lasting project that we can change in the future. So when Birmingham came to us, their previous site had a lot of downtime. They were seeing the site going down frequently and for sometimes long periods of time. There were different reasons for this, but without getting into that, we wanted to improve that on the new site. So obviously using a composable methodology and using something like Contentful, that completely separates the front end to the back end, meaning that the front end can be really heavily cached so that we don't see those spikes of downtime that they were seeing before. We put in multi-level caching, so we used output caching using .NET, we also used Redis cache, and we also used Cloudflare caching. Contentful works really well with Cloudflare actually, so the content was cached in Cloudflare, but it was being pulled from Contentful. And obviously there's that period where you want to be able to purge the data. We use webhooks in Contentful, which is out of the box, to automatically purge the content in Cloudflare when we needed to, but knowing that the content was completely cached in there and improve the performance no end. So Birmingham's building Contentful, and we have a really good relationship with them. There's a few things that we did alongside them to make this successful. The first thing is that we brought them in really early in the project. So when we were first talking to Birmingham, brought Contentful into the conversations. It's really important that they understand what they need, the amount of content types they might need, etc. So we bring them in to discuss that with them, and they're really helpful to us. The second part is we help them decide the scope or the size of the project that was needed. So Contentful is split into different licenses and spaces, and there's loads of different options you can have. We helped them because we understood what Birmingham needed, to be able to really scope that project and work out this is the amount of spaces, this is the size, etc. So that really helped. We could also get involved in the financial decisions as well. And thirdly, we really used the support that Contentful offered if there were some issues that we came across in the build. So they obviously have forums and things like that, but we also have dedicated people there that we can talk to. So if we come across a particular issue, like how do we work this out, then we go straight to Contentful, and they really helped us out with that. So the new Birmingham site built on Contentful performs much better than the old site on a few different metrics. So the first metric we looked at, and we were tracking this before we went live with the new site, is uptime. The old site had quite a lot of downtime, sporadically over weeks and months. We were seeing many different elements of downtime for different reasons. Part of that was DDoS attacks, part of that was just poor coding. Since going live, we've maintained 100% uptime, and that doesn't look to be changing anytime soon. We also load tested it so that we could see that if there were massive spikes, then it was going to be okay on that. The second metric we looked at is actual page speed. So this is important for users so that the site performs well and they can see what they want to see really quickly, but also from an indexing point of view. So things like search engines like Google, Bing, they use the Web Core Vitals to do this. We tracked these metrics and the site loads in half the time it did before. So on average, we're seeing about half a second load across every page on the site. The industry average is around 2 seconds, so that's a massive performance improvement. So using Contentful on Birmingham sped up the actual process of completing the project. And the main reason for this is the fact that it uses headless architecture, meaning that the content population from the client can be brought way back towards the front of the project. On a normal project, if it's using a traditional monolithic CMS, you would generally build the whole site and then give it to the client and they would populate at the end. This period of population can take anywhere between 1 week to a couple of months, depending on how much content and the client and the resource that the client's got. But in terms of using a headless methodology, we can upfront build all the models, the content types that they need to populate, and they can be doing that while we're developing. So you take that 1 week to 2 months, and it just goes because it's part of the project. So the timeline from beginning to end is significantly reduced. So Birmingham used Contentful as the content management system, and there was various features in that made the project a success. The first one is that it's built around using omni-channel delivery, so we can use content in various different places without having to repopulate it multiple times. On Birmingham, this was used because on the main site they use content, but also they have a corporate site and a career site, but also the in-airport mode. This doesn't use 4 different pieces of content. It's all the same content being pushed through omni-channel delivery. We also utilise webhooks, which is inbuilt in Contentful. So we use the caching mechanism in both Cloudflare and Redis, but we wanted the site to be up to date. If some piece of content was changed, we didn't want the cache to prevent that from happening. So we used a webhook, which hooks into any content that is changed within Contentful, automatically clears the cache in Cloudflare and Redis.